Pittman, Executive Editor at Cooking Light. Thank you so much for joining me today. I have a really fun summer recipe to share with you. It's Creole shrimp with creamed corn. So this is a play on shrimp and grits, but instead of grits, we're using creamed corn. So I've started with, I shucked, I don't know, 6 or so ears of corn and stripped the kernels off the cob. And I have 3 cups of fresh corn kernels here in the food processor. I'm just going to pulse that until they're kind of finely chopped, kind of to where they look almost like creamed corn. So let me just pulse that. Some pulses are longer than others. It's not going to get completely pureed, but it will start to get kind of creamy. Okay, and then I'm going to place that in a saucepan and start making the creamed corn part of this recipe. So I'm adding 1.5 cups of milk, and then those 3 cups of corn kernels. Now, it might be a little early in your area for fresh corn. If that's the case, then just keep this recipe in your back pocket because it's great for when there's a ton of summer corn. We're going to end up using about 6 or 7 ears of corn in this recipe, so it's a good one to use if you go a little overboard at the farmer's market and you have a ton of corn that you need to kind of use up. Because the thing with fresh corn is you want to use it pretty quickly after buying it. So fresh summer corn is going to be sweet. The longer it sits before you cook it, the more those sugars convert to starch and you lose that yummy sweetness that we associate with fresh summer corn. Okay, so let me move this guy out of the way and focus here on this. So I'm adding also 2 tablespoons of cornstarch. That's going to help to, of course, thicken the creamed corn. And it's going to keep it gluten-free. We're not using flour here, we're using cornstarch, plus, we're working with corn, so let's use cornstarch. Okay, while that's coming up to a boil, I'm going to turn my attention over here to another ear of corn that I've shucked and show you another component that goes into the creamed corn that helps with the texture. So I'm going to strip the kernels off of this cob. Now, you'll see a lot of tips online about how to cut corn off the cob without the kernels flying everywhere, everything from using a bundt pan to, I'm not even sure what all tips are out there, which are great, and if you use that, that's wonderful. I don't have time to go fishing out my bundt pan, so I don't do that. What I do instead is I take the ear of corn and I start cutting from about halfway down the cob onto my cutting board. And what that does is it reduces the bounce so that your corn kernels don't go bouncing and flying off everywhere. It kind of keeps everything a little more contained. I do have one little kernel that flew off over there, but in general, this helps keep everything together. I don't have to go fish out any special equipment for cutting the kernels off the cob. So I need about 1/2 cup of corn kernels for the finishing sort of stages of this dish, and that's maybe about 1/2 cup. I'm just going to throw these guys into this pot. Okay, and then I'm going to milk the cob. So say what? I am milking the cob because that's a big part of what makes this creamed corn so great. So I've cut the kernels off of this cob of corn, this ear of corn. I'm taking my knife and I'm turning it to the dull side, and I'm just going to scrape down to get the milk and the little particulates out of each individual cell. And what that's going to do is it's going to help thicken the creamed corn. I know we have the cornstarch in there, but the starch from the corn milk helps to thicken as well, and it just adds a ton more corny goodness, ton more corny flavor. So I'm working here with Silver Queen corn, which is that nice white corn. It's not quite as sweet as some of the yellow varieties or the peaches and cream, the white and yellow corn, but I love it. I think it's sweet enough, and I actually prefer it to some of the really sweet varieties. If you want, you can save your corn cobs. You can make corn stock to use in corn risotto, which would be really lovely. Just, oops, I'm about to put that in the wrong bowl. Just add water, onion peeling, some carrots, and make it like you would a vegetable stock. Okay, so this is the sort of corn milk that I've gotten from the other cobs, the other ears of corn that I worked with to get that 3 cups of corn kernels. And I'm going to put that into the pot here. It's starting to boil. Now normally I would go a little more slowly. I would lower the heat and I would simmer, but in the interest of time, I'm going to keep this on a more rapid boil to try to thicken this up. I'm going to let that go for a minute and then turn my attention to the shrimp. So this is Creole shrimp and creamed corn. And here I have some beautiful peeled and deveined large shrimp. They're raw. Okay, now I do need to turn this down a little bit because it's popping. I'm going to let that go for just another couple of minutes. It's already starting to thicken. I will season it in just a minute. Okay, so I'm turning back to the shrimp here. It's a pound of peeled and deveined large shrimp. If you keep frozen shrimp on hand, it's so great for quick dinners. You can quickly thaw it out. It's the one frozen protein that I love for quick dinners because even if you forget to thaw it, it doesn't take long to thaw it when you get home from work. Okay, to that I'm adding 1 teaspoon of unsalted or salt-free Creole Cajun seasoning. Let me turn this down even more. 3/4 of a teaspoon of smoked paprika and a 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper. I'm not adding salt to this because a lot of times shrimp is salty enough on its own, and it's going to get seasoned when it's all combined with the other ingredients in the skillet. Okay. I'm just giving that a quick toss. Okay, this is really thickening up nicely. I'm going to go ahead and remove this from the heat. It's still a little bit loose, but as it sits, it will kind of tighten up a little bit. If you're cooking this at home and it looks a little too thick after you simmer it for about 5 minutes, you can add maybe another 1/2 teaspoon of cornstarch. Okay, to that I'm adding 1½ tablespoons of butter, just for great flavor. If you don't want to use the butter, you can leave it out, but the saturated fat in this recipe is fine. It's well within our nutrition guidelines. It adds incredible flavor to the dish. And then I'm going to add some kosher salt. And that is the creamy base, the creamed corn that takes the place of grits in this recipe. Okay, so I'm going to swap out here and put the skillet on. And I'm going to hopefully get this guy going. Bear with me. Uh-oh. He just bear with me. We're live. We're having some technical issues. I don't know if he's just not making contact with the induction burner. I'm getting an error message. Okay, so we'll just abandon that and go over here to the cooktop. Turn my heat on medium-high. Try to turn that off so he quits making noise. Okay, so into the skillet, I'm going to add another little bit of butter. Again, the recipe works out fine within our nutrition guidelines. The butter adds tremendous flavor. This is just I think a 1/2 teaspoon or a teaspoon and a half. I'm also adding some olive oil. The butter is going to give good flavor and help promote browning of the shrimp. Okay, and once that's melted in the skillet, I'm going to add that shrimp mixture. I'm going to let it sit for about a minute without stirring it, and that's to help promote some browning on the shrimp. I want my pan really good and hot. I probably didn't heat it quite long enough, but that's okay.
And we have a quick question.
Okay, great.
Kristen wants to know why not take the tails off of the shrimp. Is it for looks?
That is a great question. You are exactly right. It is for looks. So we left the tails on the shrimp because they look pretty that way. When you eat them, it is a little bit of a pain to have to kind of set the tails aside, but it's a food styling thing. We always like the way they look with the tails on. It's really pretty. You can definitely pull the tails off and make it a little bit easier to eat. If you have little kids who like shrimp, like they like having the handle to hold on to, or at least mine did. Maybe they're just strange kids. But yeah, that's exactly why, just for looks. So feel free to pull the tails off if you don't want to deal with that. Okay, so let me put the shrimp in here. And like I said, I'm going to let that go for a minute or so without stirring, just to kind of help get a little bit of browning on there. Okay.
And we have another quick question.
Oh, great.
Can you do this recipe with a different protein?
You could absolutely do this recipe with a different protein. Chopped up chicken thighs would be delicious. You could add in maybe a little sausage to give it kind of an almost jambalaya type feel, a very loose jambalaya type feel. You could definitely use a firm fish. You can use like tilapia and chop it up and saute it. That would be delicious as well. So I would say, chicken or fish. Pork would be great. You could do chopped up pork tenderloin. I'm going to add in a minute some tomatoes, some fresh thyme, and a little bit of salt and garlic. I have 5 garlic cloves. My garlic cloves were pretty large, and I just went with it because I love the flavor. So for the thyme, I pulled out some of these. I love it when I buy a package of thyme and it's kind of sturdy and hardy like this, and you have a lot of sprigs that are really nice and straight and don't have a lot of branches going off of them, because it just makes it so easy to strip the leaves off. When you get that really wispy, fine, delicate thyme and you try to strip the leaves off, the stem breaks, and it makes the task a little tedious, but it's definitely worth it. I think thyme is a delicious herb. It is absolutely, hands down, my favorite herb. Great in so many dishes, and really nice here because it adds to that sort of hearty Creole flavor. Okay, let me give these guys a stir. They are looking really good. I'm going to add in now the garlic and the thyme. 5 garlic cloves, a tablespoon of fresh thyme leaves, and some grape tomatoes. It's a cup of halved grape tomatoes, just to give us some nice kind of acidity. Instead of using canned tomatoes, since it's summertime, we're using the fresh grape tomatoes. If you have really great cherry tomatoes, you could definitely use those. Oh, this is smelling so good. The shrimp is getting nice and browned. Just trying to flip these guys over to make sure they're getting equally browned on both sides. The tomatoes will start to juice out a little bit, but we are going to add a little bit of liquid toward the very end, just to try to help loosen everything up and create a little bit of a saucy moment. Oh my gosh, that looks good. It smells great. Okay, I'm going to leave that alone for just a minute. Come over here and get a little bit of salt. And this is the half cup of corn kernels that I cut and reserved that did not go into the creamed corn. Kind of nice to have sort of the corn layered in both places, in the topping as well as in the creamed corn. Just a little bit, just to give you a little pop, give you a little crunch with every bite. Okay, I'm using a nonstick skillet here. You could definitely use a stainless steel pan or a cast iron skillet, which will give you even more browning on the shrimp. But nonstick is certainly very easy to work with here. If you are working with cast iron or stainless steel, you'll probably get a good bit of brown bits that stick to the bottom of the pan, and that's wonderful because that helps flavor the sauce. Okay, I'm going to let that go for just a second and let the tomatoes kind of melt down a little more. I'm going to add in some green onions. I have half a cup of green onions, or scallions. Lovely, perfect. Okay, and then the finishing touch is a little bit of liquid. So right here I have a 1/4 cup of dry white wine. You could use chicken stock if you want, if you don't want to use the wine or don't have any wine open. And you can also just use water. There's so much flavor going on here that just water will do a great job. Just a 1/4 cup. Okay, I'm going to bring that to a boil. If you do have those brown bits stuck to the pan, just do a good job of scraping them up and scraping them into the sauce. It's going to add wonderful flavor. Oh my gosh, that looks so good. Very happy. Okay, so I'm getting ready to kind of pull everything together. Clean up a little bit of my mess here. Okay, I think this is done. Yeah, that looks incredible and smells really great and it's making me very hungry, so good thing it's lunchtime. Okay, so for this dish, to put it together, you put down your bed of creamed corn. Wonderful. So instead of grits, we have this nice, creamy, fresh creamed corn. Not a ton of sugar in there. There's no added sugar. You know, a lot of times when you buy creamed corn, either frozen or canned, there's a lot of added sugar, and you don't need it because fresh corn is naturally sweet. Let me plate up the other one here while I'm at it. Again, it's a great recipe to keep on hand for a quick weeknight meal. You can pre-shuck your corn before you go to work if you want, if you just want to kind of speed things along. It's great for when you have just a lot of fresh produce to work with. Okay, and then we dish up, look at this. This guy right here is a star. See how nice and brown he is? He's my favorite. I like the char. And so you get a little bit of that nice sauce with the scallions, the tomatoes that have kind of melted down. That goes over the top. Plate this other guy up. Wonderful, wonderful, easy summer meal. The essence of summer with the corn and those fresh tomatoes. The shrimp is easy and very quick to cook. The seasonings do all the hard work. And that's it. That is Creole shrimp and creamed corn, a fun play on shrimp and grits. Clean up this bowl. And that is a great summer dinner. So thank you so much for joining today. I hope you got something out of this episode that you can use at home. Please let me know in the comments if there are dishes that you'd like for me to tackle. If you're watching on Facebook, please like and share this video. And if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe so that you'll get notifications when we go live. Thank you so much. I'll see you next week, same time on Monday.